All right, so welcome to a very special edition of Conversations with Creatives. I am talking to my old friend and co-creator, Megan Hess. Megan is an illustrator, she's an author, she is, we could probably say you're an influencer at this point, right? She's just a great all-around artist, and she's just got so much to share about her incredible journey from starting out as a graphic designer all the way through to making a transition from, graphic design to illustration. And, she's based in Australia, how she managed to break out of that, national market and build a global business that now includes books, it includes products, a host of amazing clients. So she's had this really fantastic career that has spanned a good number of years at this point. And we're going to break it down and just talk about how she did it. I was lucky enough to be a part of like one leg of her journey, sort of in that transition from graphic design to illustration and from Australia to world domination. So we're going to get into that with some questions. But first of all, welcome, Meg. I am so happy. Can I call you Meg? Because that's what I call you.
Yes. You always have. Thanks for having me. I'm so excited that we're doing this.
Me too. Now I'm going to read Megan's bio first of all, so you guys get the whole download. So I'm going to read it, excuse me. So Megan Hess is a renowned fashion illustrator known for her distinctive style. With a background in graphic design and art direction, she's worked with top advertising agencies and iconic brands like Bergdorf Goodman and Harrods. Megan's talent shines in her portraits, and she's been featured in publications like Time Magazine, The New York Times, Italian Vogue, and Vanity Fair. She's collaborated with luxury fashion houses such as Fendi, Prada, and Dior, and has written and illustrated numerous, I think we're around 22 now, best-selling books. As the global artist in residence in, oh my God, I should know how to say this, my husband's German. Bergdorf Hotel collection. My husband's probably just like dying a death upstairs. Megan travels the world sketching at prestigious hotels. Today, she's highly sought after by elite clients, including Dior, Tiffany and Company, Louis Vuitton, and Vogue. And she creates her art using a custom Mont Blanc pen. Do you have it handy to show us?
I do.
Affectionately called Monty. How many of us can say that we have a custom Mont Blanc?
No,
Not many. I'm willing to.
Very lucky.
So I represented Meg in the US from 2007 to 2013. Clearly, neither of us ages. So
luckily Zoom has a filter.
Yeah, luckily Zoom has a filter, exactly. And I was just, the only reason I stopped working with Megan is because I stopped representing talent and moved on to my business coaching chapter. But anyway, thank you for being here.
Oh, my pleasure.
I'm so excited to talk to you. So I'm going to jump in to the first question. Again, I'm going to look down my notes just real quick. So can you talk to us a little bit about that transition from a career in graphic design and art direction to fashion illustration? How did you do it?
Well, I always say that even as a kid, I knew that I loved drawing, and I knew that that was the one thing that I really wanted to do, but I had no idea that you could have a career drawing things. Like, I just thought, who would pay you to draw things? So there's no real career path, or I couldn't see one when I was younger. And then when I finished high school, I studied graphic design because I thought, okay, that's sort of creative. It's not probably, my burning desire, but I feel like it's creative. I feel like I will, maybe it's a path into the creative world, even though I didn't quite know what it was. And I loved that I studied graphic design, and in hindsight, I look back now and there's so many things that I use from studying graphic design. But I still knew drawing was the thing that I wanted to do. And after I graduated graphic design, I sort of I worked in design agencies, but then art direction was something that just felt like a natural, turn in the road. And I loved art directing as well. Art directing was really fun. And I still had in the back of my mind that I really wanted to illustrate, and I really wanted to illustrate fashion. But again, it felt so niche, and it felt like, how would you ever pay the rent drawing fashion? I mean, that's, back in the day, the fashion illustrators were, bigger than photographers, but not when I was wanting to be a fashion illustrator. So I stayed in design, and this is I think a really key thing that when I meet other creatives and they say to me, they're in one career, whether it's creative or not, but there's something else they're really burning to do. And myself, like everybody else, I couldn't afford to just kind of take the leap and decide to become a fashion illustrator. So I kept working as an art director in design agencies, and I slowly started seeking out illustrating work. And in one of the design agencies, as an art director, you get to choose illustrators. And so it was, Megan, hire an illustrator to illustrate this project that you're art directing. And I eventually kind of worked up the courage to say to some of the creative directors, I'd actually really like to illustrate it myself. And they were always very like, this is a bit odd, but I really pursued that. And it probably took me about a year staying as an art director, working that full time, but illustrating at night, illustrating on the weekend, any little illustrations I can do. And in the beginning, until I met you, none of them were fun and none of them were inspiring, but I was sort of on my way, and I knew that regardless, this was the path that I really wanted to do. So I stayed. My transition was really staying in that full-time job that I was in and building the illustration work. And eventually I had so much illustration work. None of it was great, but enough that it was the same salary, I guess, as working as an art director. So I could actually leave that and really put my back into making the fashion illustrating work.
Yeah, I love that you sort of saw that opportunity. Well, you made your own luck, really, right? You didn't wait to be tapped on the shoulder. You, like you
No, no
say,
one was coming to tap me on the shoulder, I'm pretty sure.
you really plucked up that courage. It was a big thing, and you asked for it and you got the opportunity. And I think so much of that is, it's like, they say that where luck is where preparation and opportunity meet, right? And you saw an opportunity, and you'd been doing all of that illustration on the weekends and at night, and so you were just like, this is an opportunity I can just make for myself.
Yes, exactly. Well, I knew there was just exactly as you said. I knew that there wasn't going to be advertised jobs for it either. It was kind of something that I knew. I instinctively felt it's left of field. It's not so much now today, but back when I was, doing that, there wasn't a path. So it had to be a path that I had to try and find myself,
Yeah.
essentially.
Yeah. And so, I know that one of the challenges people have when they're first starting out, either they're starting out or they're trying to sort of pivot into a different niche, a different area, is they don't yet have the work to show. And then so people won't hire them. And, it's just that this sort of catch-22 situation, right? So you had a little bit of work, that maybe probably wasn't that aligned with, what you wanted to do. And then you were creating all of your work on nights and weekends in the fashion illustration. How did you start to get those fashion illustration gigs?
I think, as you said, a lot of the work that I had actually done that had been published or had been used professionally wasn't, not that it wasn't illustrated well, it just wasn't inspiring. It was for things that were not going to get me down the path that would impress anyone. And so I actually got rid of most of it. I instead actually created illustrations that were within the world and the type of projects that I wanted to be doing. And I think that did two things. It really showcased my style that I was really trying to work in, which has kept evolving over time. But also it was a very clear direction, I think, that the work was. And I think a lot of artists, myself included, I can paint in oil paint as well. And I do that on the weekends with my son who loves painting. But I think it's refining it to something that someone else, for example, when I came and saw you, that you could look at it and see, okay, there's a certain level of style amongst this work that shows that this is the direction this person can actually illustrate in. So that was really my focus, to really make a folio, that was, most of it wasn't really published or for anything, but it was just trying to show that this is the direction of something that could work. And so that was sort of step one. So not including everything I'd ever drawn. Not including all different looking things. I think that's a big thing that because sometimes I think when you're an artist, you say, I can do gouache and pencil, and you can do all these different things. And it's not, whilst it's impressive to your friends, it's not, I think, you know, to someone who yourself at the time was an agent, or to people who are hiring you to illustrate something, it can be confusing. So I think the one thing I probably did right was at least get a folio together that was concise. And then it was only including the little jobs that were any good. And, you know, to be honest, until we worked together and I started to get a couple of really great clients because you showed my work around New York, that is when my clients really started. So I always, which I'm so grateful for, but then I feel like that can be discouraging to new artists, because they're like, what if I don't have a Justine to show my work to people in New York? And I guess what I would say is you can still take the approach of building that folio to the work that you feel best represents you, even if it's not been published, and then trying to show that to companies or brands or agents that you think might see your sense of style.
I agree. There's so much good stuff in there. And that used to be what I used to do for all of the new creators I met as an agent. We would probably remove 75% of their portfolio.
Really? Yeah.
You know, if it didn't really align with where they wanted to go, the kinds of
Yeah.
products they wanted to get, right? So you would just keep the things that really were aligned with that. So tell us a little bit about that story, because you know you're from Australia, and when I met you, you were working with big brands in Australia, but it's a small pond, right? It's a big country, small pond at that time, at least, you know, when it came to sort of those kinds of brands. And so I know it kind of coincides with when we met, but can you tell us a little bit about how you went about breaking out of your local market and becoming an international illustrator?
Well, I think I never focused on the Australian market, not because it's not a good market, but just because the opportunities weren't, there just wasn't enough opportunities within Australia. And I also had and I always have, and I don't even really know why, but I've always had a very global perspective on things. And I think a curiosity to work with a lot of different people in a lot of different places. And I've always felt like by doing that, not only will my work move forward in a more interesting way, it will also open up a lot of different pathways. And also because illustration, fashion illustration in particular, is still quite, it's a niche area. There are only so many, there are many avenues, but it's not something that there's a million jobs a day going for those types of things and opportunities. So my thought has always been to really focus on everything internationally. And I think, you know, anything that was of a really great, I think, especially in the beginning, when obviously you know, like many artists, you really want to try and earn money, even as part of what you're doing. But I always saw in the very beginning that if I work on projects that have a really good creative opportunity, that I always believed would bring ultimately success within this. I just had this feeling that if I base my decisions on creative outcome, that will actually lead me there. And I think that has been really the big thing. And I think focusing on that with also in an international sense. So in America, when we worked, I remember when we first worked together, and you had a plan for me. And that was another big thing. I didn't have a plan until I met you, other than I just was really trying to find an agent or someone who could, you know, help me. And you had a plan which wasn't to rush out and illustrate everything we could. And even like you said to me, lots of people are liking your work and everything. And I'm like, oh, which ones are we doing? And you were like, no, not, we're just like, we're waiting till it's the, you know, and even we'll start with a department store, and then that would be great if you had something like that. And then you had a plan of different areas, and I was just, wow, that would be incredible. And I think those projects that we worked on with Bloomingdale's and all the different projects, they really, because they're a big brand, and even though they're American, they're very known then internationally. For me, working on, say, Bloomingdale's with you, or the thing we did with the windows for Bergdorf, that then sparked interest from Harrods in the UK. And then in turn, that sparked interest with Galeries Lafayette in Paris. And then I realized early on that bigger international projects, which are not easy to get at all, but I think it's the momentum of working with one leads you to something in another country, and then you're slowly kind of building work within different areas. And not only does that kind of make your work interesting and different, it means that I was working with a lot of really, really inspiring different creative people, sometimes difficult. That's a big part of it too. That's a challenge of that. Sometimes there's, but I think that, working out how to deal with someone on a luxury brand in France compared to where and we've joked about things like this in the past, where it's interesting dealing with different people, but there can be lots of emotion about a brief and different things, as opposed to some American briefs that I've worked on where they're very clear about what they want, and it's just a different process. But all of that has helped build the international work.
Yeah, no, I love that take on it, that it was a sort of a strategic and a slow progression, and but then it also had a sort of certain organic nature to it as well, right?
Yes.
I'm thinking about with Harrods, like I remember we had approached them several times before you ended up getting the project in a different way, right?
Yes.
So you really can you also can't sort of like guarantee what the outcomes are going to be, but you can have a strategy. And because I remember we were clear about a department store, because it could really give you so many opportunities, and Bloomingdale's was such a great partner to us in those early days, and in really building not only your visibility, but also I think it just gave you, as a growing illustrator who was mastering her craft, so many opportunities to really refine that look in collaboration with them. And, I remember just like it's not even, I would say, the quality, but the sort of refinement of your illustrations really increased in those first sort of few years. Would you agree?
Yes, absolutely. Because I think it was a fast pace. I'd sort of gone from really like sort of working on things that were not inspiring to suddenly, when we were working together, a lot of the projects were, enormous to me, like illustrating all of in store for Bloomingdale's for Christmas, from cutouts to windows to snow globes and bauble. All of that was so exciting, and I didn't want to mess it up, and I wanted to really get it right. And I think and creatively as well, I think a lot of I can't remember the creative director that we worked with at that time, but I remember that they were very specific about colors and line work, and it was great because it was intense, but it meant that I had to quickly refine my style to really make it work. And it looked really, I think it dusted off any phrase in that process, and it streamlined things for the better. So it was an incredible learning curve, learning as I was going. Still am.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Never stop, do you? I mean, I hope not.
Yeah, no. It's amazing. It's almost a little bit like, some pressure, and then, like you say, along with the feedback of really sort of like seasoned professionals, really, I mean, you sort of really stepped up to it. So you did definitely sort of rise to the occasion. Now, I want to just be mindful of your time. So let's just take a little bit of a shift. Tell me a little bit about the books, right? So you're a seasoned author. I think it's 22 books you're at now. I remember when you did your first one. Now you're just cranking them out, it seems. Tell us a little bit about that transition, your experience of authoring books, and any advice you would give to a creative that really kind of dreams of having their work be seen in the pages of a book.
Yeah, I never would, even when we first worked together, I never thought that I would end up doing books. I did do the first book when we were together, but if I'd known then what I work on now of a day, the amount of books and things, I would have been really surprised. And I think this is an example of, creative paths over time. There are things that you just discover along the way that you just really love more so than other things, and you lean into them. And definitely for me in the beginning, books was more of something, not a hobby, but it wasn't a huge part of my work. And they do, books take an enormous amount of work to create. but something happened along the way where after the first one, after about book 3, the book started to actually do quite well. And not only that, I just started to really find my groove with the process of working on them. And there was something, something different about doing a commission for a client, which I still love and still do, but I was doing mainly that in the beginning, where they were this more of a short stop and start. It was very much around a brief for a client. And there was something that became very, I still feel it about books. It's almost, it's like it feels indulgent to be able to just work on a book. That's how I feel, even though they're an enormous amount of work. There's something about it, from the children's books, which I completely never thought that I would end up doing so many of that direction. But that it's a very enjoyable, creative feeling for me. And in the fashion books as well, there's something about having a topic and immersing myself into it. And it's not over really quickly, which is part of the trauma of it. And because there's 250 pages sometimes in these books, and you work it out, there's 70 illustrations, there's this many words. But I love the process of it. And I think it's the fact that I have really loved it that I have lent into it. And now I do work on a lot of books, and I have a complete, over time, like anything else, when I think back now about when I first worked on them, my process was all out of whack. I don't even know how I ever got them finished, but now I have a really clear, this sounds unromantic, but a really clear formula to work on them, which just makes it all much more enjoyable. And I can really plan it and enjoy the process and leave that right amount of time for the dreaming at the start that I've learned never to rush, because don't want to get to the end of the book and realize this sucks. I should have. Yeah. And so but then once the dreaming has happened, and there's a lot of collaboration with the publisher as well, and my editor, and once we're in the stage where I know exactly what I'm writing and drawing, it's just a really enjoyable process. So I would say to any other author, any other artist that is looking to go down that path, if that's something that you're really interested in, absolutely do it. I think any path that you find yourself drawn to, whether it seems impossible or seems like it's a different direction to what you're on, who cares? I think you go down that path there. And I always say there are all those stories and cliches that you hear that J.K. Rowling showed, I don't know, 30 publishers before they would publish Harry Potter. They're all true. So take that on board. There are lots and lots of publishers and lots of people that, and I think with books too, and this is something that I learned early on, getting really good criticism on a book in the early stages to everything from, will this sell? Who is going to buy this book? Are there a lot of other books on this topic? Sometimes there are, but that doesn't mean yours can't be good too. And I think, and this is the biggest thing that I learned from us working together was yes, I wear my heart on my sleeve. I probably always will. But I've become, and a lot of it is thanks to you with the early lessons that I sort of learned when we worked together, to not fear criticism, not fear rejection, not fear someone not liking it. I really don't anymore at all. And I get excited when I see a red pen coming back from my publisher as to what they've written or they think we need to lose. And whereas in the beginning, I would have probably wanted to cry. But that's a part of books as well. That's a big part of books. Someone will literally read it and say, you know what, this is a great idea, but your first chapter, it just makes no sense. Or this topic, maybe it's slightly different topic. And in your mind, you've thought, no, it has to be on this. So I think if you are open to getting feedback from whoever you trust in that world, and then honing something that makes sense to you, and then showing a publisher, and don't expect the first publisher to like it, show more than one. And yeah, I think it's a great process, a lot of work, but I always think anything that you have that inkling to do, better to try it and either not enjoy it or move away from it than to always wonder, should I have tried that?
Oh, I love it. That's such a great sort of, I think, parting piece of advice, you know, is just that if you're drawn to something, pun intended, try it. What's the worst that could happen? Because if nothing else, you'll grow in one way or another from the experience, right?
Yeah, I 100% believe that.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I think we're going to leave it on that note because I think it's lovely. You and I have already talked about, you know, us having so much to talk about that we're going to come back and do another conversation where we can talk about so many other aspects of your journey and how you've, you know, developed your career. But I want to thank you so much for doing this
Oh,
conversation with us. I know that people are going
thank
to
you
love
for having me.
it.
It's so, I love any time we get to catch up in any capacity. So
Me too. Me too. So I know that everyone's going to get tons out of this. You can find Meg at meganhess.com. Tell us your Instagram handle.
it's Megan Hess _official.
Official. I thought that was there. I
Yeah.
have yet to have the need to put official after the end of my Instagram.
The only reason I did that was because there was about 70 other million Megan Hesses when I and no one else was shooting for official, so I took it.
I love it.
Got in
We'll
early.
put all of the details in the description and everything else, but you can find Megan there. You can buy her books, you can buy her products, and you can just follow along with her fabulous life. So thanks again, Megan. I'm going to see you
Thanks,
soon.
Justine. Bye. Bye.